welcome to another episode of MYD Global. I'm your host, Leanne Hackman-Carty, and today we have someone very special with us. Her name is Roné de Beauvoir, and Roné is coming to us from Houston, and we're lucky to have her because I know she's traveling a lot. But today our topic is going to be a little bit different than normal. Normally we talk about natural disasters and their impact on communities and individuals, but often we forget the human side of things. And there are man-made disasters and humanitarian disasters, and that's why we have Roné here today. And Roné, thank you very much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Can you just give people a background on who Roné is and what's brought you to where you are today?
I am an international award-winning speaker. I've been on the speaking circuit a long time. I don't want to say how long because then I'll tell my age, and I don't want to do that. But I've been a speaker for many years, and I have lived in more than 40 countries, a year, 2 years. In every country as a speaker. As I've traveled and lived around the world, I have discovered that there are many opportunities out there for someone like me who is a humanitarian at heart. Everything I do is all about adding value to other people. So whether I'm on a stage talking about social media or empowering women on some level of business, or whether I'm just standing in a church, for example, and trying to empower today's youth, no matter their race, no matter their religious belief, no matter their background, but just trying to solidify in their hearts and minds that they can achieve what they want and how they are indeed the future for tomorrow. So if I had to say that I do anything, I am a warrior who empowers people to a higher level and the greater good.
That's awesome. I know you and I met in Vancouver. It was probably 2 or 3 years ago.
Yes.
And I sat through your session. And I remember the time you were talking a lot about social media and how to build audiences and communicate in that medium. But you know, over the past couple of years, I've watched your social posts.
Yeah.
And that's why I called you and I wanted to talk, because I've seen you've been traveling a lot, doing a lot of humanitarian work. Can you tell us just a little bit about even what started that? What fueled that passion to say, I am going to do this now?
I often get hired, Leanne, to talk at various events. I mean, large, small, middle-sized, you name it, literally all over the world on social media. What I'm known for is talking about social media, how to motivate women, empower women. I do a lot of women's conferences. But what I noticed, even when we met, I talked about social media and how to tie it into the business. But what I noticed was that so many speakers and organizations are out there. Everybody's talking about social media, whether it's to empower millennials, whether it's to change the revenue stream of a business. Everybody's talking about social media, but nobody was talking about social media as it relates to social good. My first time to talk about it on a huge stage was in Amman, Jordan, in, I think it was July or September 2016. And the organizer of that event, we're very good friends even to this day. In fact, I'm doing a big event for him in November in Amman, Jordan. And I talked about how to take social good, how to take social media and turn it into something good. What we see all the time with social media is how somebody's being trashed. Okay, I could cite a lot of names here, but I won't. But it's always about how somebody's being trashed, how somebody is, slapping somebody or, something horrific. It's generally not something of good. I have searched and searched and searched, and nobody was using Periscope or Facebook Live, all of these wonderful live streaming platforms that I also became an expert at, being hired to talk about live streaming. Nobody was using live streaming to show children dying and crawling from dehydration right here in the United States, let alone Africa. So I decided that if organizers were going to hire me as a speaker, as you can probably tell, I'm gifted at it. I was born to be a speaker. My father was a well-known, wonderful man of God, a pastor. My mother was an educator for 35, almost 40 years. So speaking comes naturally for me. I was raised to open my mouth, articulate my thoughts, express myself with my words, not my facial expressions. That should be an enhancer, but my words should go before me and make a path or lay a path for me. And I decided that if organizers were going to hire me to talk about social media, I insisted that they allow me to tie in the social good. And that is really the crux of what, as you said, you've seen my paradigm shift. I started, I've lived in 40 countries, and wherever I go to speak, I don't care if I'm there 3 days, I've always made contact, Leanne, with someone in that country to take me to the areas where there's poverty, where there are people living in villages or huts, or where people are living in apartment buildings, but like in India, in a slum. I always do that. I've been doing that for years, and taking some of my proceeds as a speaker and just doing something quietly. That grew in my spirit. That grew when I started going to places like Pakistan to speak and to take clothes and have children and their mothers. As I'm preparing to leave the country, the most amazing things these people do in Pakistan and India, you stand like you're some royal figure. And as everybody is leaving, I would give my last talk. They come and I have a chance to hug and kiss them. I don't care that sometimes people can't wash their face with Shiseido as I do, or with Estee Lauder. Whatever they have to clean their face, that's what they have. And what I'm saying here is that I kiss people on the face. I want them to feel my embrace and my love for them. But what they do, Leanne, they bend over and they take these two fingers and they touch the top of my feet. And what that means, I'm holding back tears. What it means is that they pray that God will always guide your feet to somebody like them. The first time that happened to me in my life was 2013. I was in Lahore, Pakistan, and I was there on a humanitarian mission. I was using churches to find where the poor people were. I was so far out in the wilderness, Leanne. If I had been kidnapped, God forbid, they never would have been able to find me. If my parents would have had to have a memorial, but certainly not a burial. But those kinds of things don't stop me. I was surrounded by men with guns to protect me as I was going about trying to touch, heal, and inspire. I wanted to find out, what does this village need? What is the greatest thing I can do to make their lives as good as it can possibly be? They may not be able to live as I do, or as you do, or as many of your viewers are living. But if I can do something, starting with water, and I'm sure we'll come to that later, so be it. It is done. And that is what really, Leanne, that's what turned me. And when we met, I was asked to be there as a speaker in Vancouver, specifically to talk on social media, not social good. So you always want to adhere to the organizer, because you won't get invited back if you don't. And that's not good for somebody like me. I need platforms to be heard, to be discovered, to present what I'm doing, not just to a local community, but literally to the world. And that's where it began. When I saw that in that culture, touching my feet like that, and then me asking the translator, who, by the way, her brother is like my godson. I met him when he was 16. He's now like 26 or something like that. He's getting married, and I'm heading back to Pakistan to be a part of that wedding. That's just a side note. But when she explained to me what that meant, it shook me to my core. And I've discovered since then, everywhere I go in the world, when I'm doing my humanitarian work, every culture has a way of humbling themselves to say thank you. And it's what drives me.
That's awesome. I mean, I know that, in this field that we're kind of both in slightly different ways, I know that hope is a big thing for people.
Yes.
And so without hope, it's very difficult to move on, to get up in the morning, to put your shoes on, to go to work, to clean out your home, and, just all of those things that seem so simple to some of us become so big. And when you have disasters happen, and I'm thinking in particular a natural one right now, it's always the most vulnerable that get hit again, the ones that are least likely to be able to afford the hit on their home or on their community.
Exactly.
And yet they wake up, they come to you and see what you need. And so it's always very, very humbling. So you're going to make me cry, but I mean, let's try let's try and get through the interview. But so as far as some of the situations, some of the places you have been, when you're going in, where are you seeing the greatest gaps, the greatest opportunities to make a difference?
Water. When we talk about, now this show is about disasters, natural disasters. Let me share with you and your viewing audience how I'm experiencing natural disasters in countries around the world. For example, this time of the year, we call it the summer. No matter where you live in the world, with the exception of maybe Australia, it's winter. Summer is during the winter for most countries, isn't it? So what I'm seeing is, I just came back from Uganda. I was there nearly 2 weeks. And in the summer, most countries, especially in the Sub-Saharan areas and regions, when the summer hits, water stops. So people are going to water pumps to try to get water, by the way, that's already killing them. Nothing against the government. This is why I work with governments, to give them the resources that I have, even some of my patent water devices. But you get to these areas and there's no water. The scarcity of water is the biggest natural disaster going in the world right now today. For example, you wouldn't think a fine city like Dubai would be suffering from water scarcity. It is. You wouldn't think that Cairo, Egypt, one of the most highly visited tourist destinations in the world, is having trouble with water that is diluted, or is, shall we say, filled with bacteria and things that are not good for the body, good for the digestion system. And yet it is. The greatest problem naturally, as it relates to a disaster, is water. That is the reason about a year or two ago, you saw me make the complete paradigm shift to focusing on the way I use social media now is different from how I did it when we met. Now I use social media to highlight what I'm doing as a global humanitarian. So instead of talking about social media, I use social media to draw a spotlight such as what my staff have on me right now, to have good lighting for this interview. So I take a spotlight through social media to draw attention to disasters. When the flooding happened here in Houston, called Harvey, let me tell you something. This city was shut down. I'm in an area called Pearland. It's a very, uppity kind of community. Houses out here are $1 million and plus up. I watched the flooding on my street get so high. Children in the neighborhood were in canoes, Leanne, playing in the canoes on the streets here. My thought was, as the water was constantly rising, is it going to come inside the house and destroy everything I have, as it did so many people? You cannot imagine, even now, there's a great disaster in Flint, Michigan, all tied around water. So the greatest disaster I'm finding is the scarcity of water. Agriculture is second to that. How are they going to maintain growing their crops, especially in developing nations all over Africa and Sudan and places like that? This is the reason I created the Clear Water Initiative. The Clear Water Initiative helps to combat disasters in one area, water. Quickly, I will say that the initiative is all about the Fish Foundation, my charity, finding the top trending companies that create products like myself that change the taste, the color, the texture, the nutrient composure, everything about that water, so that even if, as you see all the time, children in Africa go into filthy, urinated streams to drink water, when they take my device and pour water through it, what comes out is clean mountain spring water with a slightly high pHP. That is what I do as it relates to natural disaster.
Well, and that's awesome, because, so many times in a disaster, people, good, well-meaning people, send things. They send,
Yes.
Usually it's crap. They'll send their crappy
Yeah.
stuff that they're not using. And then the recipient on the other end gets all this junk that nobody
Yes.
wanted. And when you think, so what can I give that's meaningful? What can I give that will make a difference? And when you think about it, food and water are pretty fundamental. And, you see fiascos like what we saw in Puerto Rico, where they
Yes.
delivered flats of water and they found them in a farmer's field months later and not
Yes.
been used. And you just think, what an atrocity. You've got a disaster that happens and then another disaster where the aid doesn't even get to the victims.
To the people, exactly.
And so, this, and I would love, I'll put a link in the description of the video so people can learn more about your Clean Water Initiative and your foundation. I do think that sometimes you just have to meet people at the very fundamental level and what they need as a human being, their basic needs. And then you can go, sometimes we talk about, oh, do this strategy and do this. Well, they can't even hear that until they have food and shelter and clothing.
And a healthy body. Without good, solid, clean water, oxygen is not properly flowing through a person's body. And may I tell you, when you mentioned how water really never got to the people in Puerto Rico, let me tell you something. This is the reason I personally go. I don't always take an entourage, as it were. I always have security because I was recently appointed as an ambassador. So I do have one security personnel. I have a driver to drive me where I have to go. And I may have one person that knows me intimately well. When I say that, I don't mean romantically, but maybe someone on staff or someone in that country that the UN has appointed or shared with me as an NGO that I can feel safe with to go to these various areas where disaster is happening. And I'm telling you, when I go to a country, The first trip, that first 7 to 10 days, is what I call discovery and understanding. I go there first to look at hospitals, government type hospitals. I go to the villages. If there has been a disaster, when I was in, I almost said Ebola, but when I was in Uganda a few weeks ago, the Ebola outbreak hit Uganda. I was in Kampala and in Bugiri and some of the villages that are like 6 hours outside of drive outside of Kampala, the capital city. But those are also natural disasters. And people who are poorly and who are living in poverty, they're already at a disadvantage. When a hurricane comes and it hits places like that, or flooding, like they had in Karachi recently and in India, these are people, the first people it hit and destroys are people in poverty. So I always go that first week to discover, what is the need here? What's happening here? Are people starving? Do people need more water? Do you need clothes? I try not to give out money, because as people are making donations to my organization, you can't be too careful sometimes with so-called directors of these various charities. You know, you hear it all the time. They get the money and they run off and people never see it. No, not with me. I go and personally see what is needed. And then me and my staff, we go and buy the supplies. And then either it's shipped back or I take it on the plane with me. I pay the extra, fees to pack huge boxes. And when I get off the plane with my luggage, I get off with huge boxes. And this way, my donors know Roné's not using this money. 9 times out of 10 on a 20-hour flight on Doha or Emirates, and I'm mentioning those airlines because they've been very good to me, knowing and hearing that I'm doing humanitarian work, I fly in coach. Because that $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 that I'm spending in business class, I can use that to do what I need to do for a suffering family somewhere. So I fly in coach. Well, when I'm checking in, and it's just so wonderful the way God is just blessing the works of my hands and the desires of my heart to help others. Oh, so this box, what do you have in it? I'll tell them what I have in it, and they'll give me my boarding pass, and I look and I see I'm in 3C. It's like I get a free upgrade. So it's like you do good and good comes back to you and you're not even looking for it, So I could go on and on and on about all the wonderful things that's happening and the way people are responding. So
and that's great.
Share that.
That's great, because so often we turn on the news and it's always bad news. It's always negative. And it just, when you surround yourself with all that negativity, you become negative. And so it's always, I find it always very inspiring to be around people who, yes, there are bad things that happen, but there's things we can each do. And we don't all have to take a plane to Dubai, but we can support people who can, who are on the front lines. We can find good organizations that are making a difference, even if we want to sit at home on our couch. But there are things we can all do. And I mean, it's very, for those who are watching, I'm hoping that they can see that someone like yourself, I mean, you have just dedicated your life and your talents and your skills to making a difference. And as long as you have breath in your body, I'm sure you will be doing that.
I will.
That's just how you're wired.
Yes.
So I guess before we kind of wrap up, I just want to know, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you would want to say or comment on, things you've learned over the past little bit, things that you want to challenge other people to do?
Yes. One last disaster I'd like to share. I just launched a new initiative called the Fish Foundation Global Nation, which is the name of my foundation, Refugee Initiative. One of the greatest additional disasters I'm seeing is the lack of support to refugees. I have over 400 refugees in Turkey and in Jordan, Syrian refugees that I'm helping. My initiative, Leanne, is, and you'll see it coming up on LinkedIn and all over social media, I am going to, shall we say, empower or encourage 20,000 or more companies to partner with us to employ, to mentor, to train, to help develop skills in refugees for the workplace. I think we can turn the world around by training and employing refugees. They're not looking for a handout. They're looking, or a hand, what do we say, hand out? Yeah, they're looking for a hand up. My dad would say that very often. One of the things that I say to people all the time on stage is man believes in counting numbers. God believes in making numbers count. That's my mantra. I believe in making numbers count. So whether there's 2 or 3 or hundreds, I'm begging, pleading, imploring, touching, asking to join us to employ, train, or mentor refugees. Give them a skill, allow them to be employed legally and lawfully, to build not only for their families, but to re-establish themselves. The reason I'm asking for that is because one of the main things that I've learned since I've completely shifted my direction in my business is that people that are suffering, even in Western countries, people right here in Houston that I'm trying to help who are still living in trailers from Harvey. The one thing I've learned is that people are not necessarily trying to get you just to give to them, just to hand out to them. They really do want solidified assistance. They want to be able to prove that they're worthy, that they can, and that more importantly, they will. They just need to be given a chance. That's all they want. Just one chance. In America, you can't get credit until you've got it. Well, bloody hell, if nobody gives it to you, how are you going to get it? So all they want, and this is what I'm seeing around the world, no matter their religious belief, no matter their social economic status, they just want one chance. Even here with the immigration situation, these people just want one chance. So help me to help others.
Yeah, no, and I am with you. I'm with you 100% on that. I remember many years ago, I was working in the social work field, and one of the guys said to me, he worked for a government agency, and he said, you know what? He said, the thing that really hit him one day was a kid said to him, they were a kid in foster care, but basically said, every adult in my life is paid to be there. And he said, that just killed him. And I said, I think of that to this day. I think everybody just needed one person to believe in them.
Yes.
Like you said, one chance. And that can make a huge difference. And I think, you know, often we think, well, it's just me. What could I possibly do? Well, you can make a difference. One person can make a difference in the lives of other people. You just have to choose to do it. Yeah, to have the courage to do that. And I mean, kudos to you and the work you're doing and that fundamental shift, because I think, you know, whether it's a lightning bolt that hits you and goes, this is my new direction, or it's a subtle kind of movement where a door's shut and others open, you know, that's amazing that you've taken that direction and you continue to make lives better as you travel, as you meet others and challenge them and inspire them to make a difference.
Yes.
I truly wish you all the best, and we'll, you know, even as we're talking, I can think of some people I'd like to connect you with, and we'll do so. And we will definitely put those links in the bottom of the video description so people can get in touch with you and follow you on your social media and watch what you're doing and see how they can contribute. But thank you so much,
My pleasure.
Roné,
Thank
for
you.
being here today. And I think we'll wrap up. And if for anyone who's watching this, I encourage you to get in touch with Roné and maybe get involved. And if you want more information on disasters, I encourage you to subscribe, because we're going to continue to have interviews with people who are making a real difference on the front line and providing hope and inspiration in this somewhat, it can be an overwhelming field. And so thank you again. And until next time, I always tell our viewers, but I'm telling you too, to stay safe.
Yes, thank you, Leanne. Love you.